Greetings. I trust you've had a fruitful day. I do not say happy, though I hope it has been happy. Namo tassa bhagavato harahato sambha sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sambha sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sambha sambuddhassa. Homage to the Buddha, the blessed, noble, and fully self-awakened one. So we're making our way through the discourse on right mindfulness. We'll see how far we get this evening. Don't want to rush it, but remember this is only a quick introduction, and there are many studies now that you can follow if you wish. So we'll talk about the body, the breath yesterday, and there's a refrain that comes after every section, and it says, in this way he abides contemplating the body as body. It really should be in the body, right? Body in the body, internally, and abides contemplating the body in the body externally. That's a bit more difficult. It's really recognizing the breath in other people. So we've talked about that, I think. What else? He abides both the arising and falling factors. So this is beginning to understand the impermanence of the breath. Then finally, he establishes just this mindfulness, just this direct, clear comprehension of what's happening, so that just enough intuitive intelligence and mindfulness is there for insight to arise. And that just comes with practice, right? You just keep practicing. And he abides independent, not clinging to anything in the world. So by taking the position of the observer within ourselves, we've left the world, as it were. We've transcended it. We found a different relationship with it. We don't want to be concerned with it as somewhere where we're going to find any permanent happiness, or try to escape the natural pains of living, you see. And so he abides contemplating the body in the body, or as the body, but whatever you prefer. Now the next section is the 4 postures. It's very simple, very simply stated. When you're walking, you understand I am walking. So in other words, you're aware of walking. And the same with standing and sitting and lying down. So those postures relate mainly to meditation practice. That lying down one, it came up this afternoon in a discussion. It's difficult to do that because as soon as you lie the body down, there's no physical energy supporting your mindfulness. And therefore, of course, there's a tendency just to fall asleep, and there's not much to be gained in oblivion. And there is one way, for those of you who weren't there this morning, a little trick that people use to keep awake if they're doing the lying meditation, is to keep your hand up like this, you see. And every time you fall asleep, the hand drops, see. And that wakes you up. And if you put something just under your elbow so that you don't hit the funny bone, after a while, it just stays there. You know, the body learns how to just keep your hand there, just as it learns. If you're ill, although actually when you're ill, it's more common to practice metta, loving kindness towards the body. And there's always this internally and externally. In other words, recognizing this in ourselves, but also recognizing it in other people. Okay, and that gives you this connection. If you remember, when the Buddha was fully liberated, he had these 2 insights: how he had come there by his moral, ethical actions. And it was that line of ethical actions, rebirth after rebirth, that led to his liberation. And he saw the beings also moving from realm to realm, dependent on their moral and ethical actions. So what was a personal law becomes a universal law. So what is personal for us becomes universal when you see other people behaving or or acting in the same way, having the same experiences, similar experiences. And then, of course, there's a whole section here about daily life practice. So again, one acts in full awareness going forward, coming backwards, returning. One acts in full awareness when looking ahead or looking away, when flexing and extending one's limbs, when wearing, well, here, of course, it's directed to the monks, but wearing one's clothes, acts in full awareness when eating, drinking, consuming food and tasting. That's one that's devoted entirely to the whole process of eating. Who acts in full awareness defecating and urinating. See, don't forget that, very important. And then acts in full awareness walking, standing, sitting, falling asleep, and waking up, talking and keeping silent. So, in other words, this mindfulness we should carry with us throughout the day as best we can. How do we know we're being mindful? You see, we're being mindful when we're being deliberate, when you are doing what you're meant to do. If you're doing something and the mind's wandering, take a simple example. If you're washing the pots and you're thinking about where you're going to go for your holidays, then there's a split. You're not being mindful about what you're doing. So the pots don't get washed so well, or you drop one or whatever. But as soon as you wake up from that little fantasy, then you can decide: are you going to stop and think about your holiday, or are you going to keep washing the pots? So you keep washing the pots. So it's this mindfulness is just being with what you're doing. I remember, because the Mahasi techniques, everything's very slow, people were much confused about daily life. Did you have to go very slow in order to be mindful? Now, luckily, I'd begun with Zen up at Throstle Hole Abbey in Northumberland, and there we used to do everything at speed. It wasn't slow, like you did everything very, very fast. And the idea was that you built up energy while you were doing this, working, cleaning or out in the gardens. And because you were working fast, you had to keep your mind on it, or else you'd stump your foot, you'd cut yourself, you'd do something silly. And when you sat, of course, that energy and focus stayed with you. You see, and that's one reason why the Zen I was doing didn't have a particular focus, because you could maintain just that attention, just feeling, observing things that came into your mind. We didn't sit that long, 40 minutes. So I didn't have that problem really, but people who were sort of just doing the Vipassana, just doing the Mahasi, there was this constant question, well, how do you keep mindfulness? You have to go very, very slow, you see. And I remember my teacher, Sayadaw Janika, he'd sort of pick up a pencil that was lying there, he'd pick it up and then he'd put it down. That was it, really. That was a sort of a demonstration of mindfulness in action. So don't mystify it. It's just being with what you're doing. Being your doing is a way to put it. And then of course the usual refrain, to be aware of what you're doing, to begin to recognize that things are finished, especially finished. See, we're very much aware of beginning something, starting something, because that tends to be new. It tends to be renewal, rebirthing moment after moment. But we're not so much aware of things ending. Before something ends, we're on to something else. The ending, all ends, remember, are mini deaths. And so we tend to shy off them. We tend to sort of leap beyond that to the next thing to be done. And then, of course, one can have insights, peeling a banana, having a cup of tea. Insights don't come just when you're sitting. In fact, in the Mahasi tradition, it's sort of well known that it's when you're not sitting that you're more likely to have an insight, because often when you're sitting, you're trying to get an insight, you're trying to do something. And then when you get up from the seat, because you've got that mindfulness and concentration, and you've given up trying to see something or understand something, suddenly there is a seeing of impermanence or not self, or just that process of creating suffering for ourselves through wrong desire. So mindfulness in action can bring about the same insights as in meditation. Now, the next one, let's just keep an eye on the time here. That's good. The next one is rather interesting. It's translated as the foulness of the body parts. I'll just read it through so that the Buddha's not shy of the body. And he reviews the same body up and down from the soles of the feet down from the top of the hair, bounded by skin and full of many kinds of impurities. In the body, head hairs, body hairs, nails, teeth, skin, flesh, sinews, bones, bone marrow, kidneys, heart, liver, diaphragm, spleen, lungs, large intestines, small intestines, contents of the stomach, feces, bile, phlegm, pus, blood, sweat, fat, tears, grease, spittle, snot, oil of the joints, and urine. That's a good list, isn't it? What intrigues me actually about this list is that the brain isn't included. That was a later addition. I don't know whether the ancients knew what the brain was or what it was for, because of course when it drops out of somebody's head, it's just this lump of fat, isn't it? And then he gives an example. Now, this example really tells us what the attitude really is. It's unfortunate that people use the word disgust or foulness, but it says, just as there were a bag with an opening at both ends, full of many sorts of grains, such as hill rice, red rice, beans, peas, millet, and white rice, and a man with good eyes were to open it and review it thus. This is hill rice, this is red rice, this is beans, this is peas, this is millet, and this is white rice. So a bhikkhu refused the same body full of impurities. Now, there was a moment there where the Buddha obviously gave a very inspiring speech about about the body, looking at the body like this, and he must have got across to these monks, to really look upon the body as something that is not to be indulged. Their senses weren't to be indulged, but somehow they got the wrong message. And so what happened was, and he talked to the bhikkhus in many ways on the subject of impurity. He spoke in praise of what is impure. He spoke in praise of the contemplation of what is impure. He spoke again and again in praise of the stage of meditation of what is impure. And then the bhikkhus went away to meditate. Now they dwelt intent upon the practice of contemplating what is impure in different ways. They were troubled in their own bodies, ashamed of them, loathing them. And as if, and then he goes on, it is as if a woman or man, when young or delicate and fond of dressing, having washed their hair, would be troubled, ashamed, and full of loathing because they had a corpse of a snake or of a dog or of a man hung around their neck. Now, so these bhikkhus, being troubled by their own bodies, ashamed of them and loathing them, by themselves deprived themselves of life and deprived each other of life. So they actually killed each other and killed themselves. Now, when this came back to the Buddha, of course, he must have been, well, it says here that he's extremely angry with them. He must have been, shall we say, very forthright. Bhikkhus, it is not suitable for bhikkhus. It is not fit. It is not proper. It is not worthy of a disciple. It is not good. It should not be done. Killing each other, that is. And then he says, well, whatever bhikkhu, and then he makes a rule, which is the third rule, I think. Yes, the third rule, the parajika, the defeat rule, whereby if you break the rule, you've lost your robes, right? You're no longer in communion. That's how it's put. Whatever bhikkhu intentionally deprives a human being of life or seeks to be the knife bearer, he is defeated. He is not one in the community. Yeah, and there's also encouraging somebody to commit suicide. That's also included in being a knife bearer. So it becomes a third major rule for monks after that. And then, of course, Ananda says to the Buddha, it would be a good thing, Lord, if you would explain in another way. So the community of bhikkhus might establish their in knowledge. And of course, he does do that. Now, interestingly enough, the word that's often translated as disgust is nibbida, but nibbida really ought to be translated as disenchantment, a disinterest. So the whole idea is that you balance the pleasures of the body with the displeasures, with the things that are unpleasant, and that way you get a sort of balanced view of your body. And when it comes to lust, erotic feelings that have become obsessive, they become lustful. When one actually makes that body go to the toilet, then that definitely undermines the lust. But you're not supposed to then feel disgusted of the object of your lust. You're just supposed to be able to counteract that lustfulness that's grown in you, you see. So it's a balancing act. But of course, the body is also a precious vehicle. The Buddha is clear about that. This is a precious life form. And we ought to care for the body. He's often talking about the need for health for the body in order to meditate. So one has to be careful with this. Now, there was one incident, I've been trying to find it, but I've been unable to do so, where the monks have been practicing this contemplation on the foul parts of the body. Even that's a strong word, on the parts of the body that we dislike or we sometimes find disgusting. And he sees that they've created some form of non-attachment to the body, but there's something missing. And what he does is he teaches them loving kindness, and according to the tale, they all become fully liberated. So there's the balance, really, to respect the body, care for the body, the need for the body, but we're always trying not to get caught up in its sensuality, and not be attached to our sense pleasures, but to recognize that they arise and pass away. Yes, and that allows us to enjoy things without that stickiness, without wanting more. So that's the purpose of the meditation on the body. And as usual, he abides contemplating both internally, one's own body, another person's body, and in that way they abide independent. You see, that's the nice word. Independent, not clinging to anything in the world. I think we can stop there because the next bit now takes a little bit more, I ought to spend a bit more time on that because that's the elements. So I hope that's a little bit just to go on with, It's something you can practice by yourself. It's not a big deal, just recognizing the parts of the body that we don't normally like. So there's a sense of disgust for parts of the body, and then is that necessary? Can you just see what the disgusting parts of the body is just a necessary function? Chemicals, change your view of it. Then there's the body as body beautiful. Expecting the body to be beautiful, and that often has an effect upon our self-esteem. And just remind ourselves it's an organism, and it has a job to do, and it's making me see things and hear things. It carries me here and there. It lifts things for me. So there's a case of bringing ourselves off this idea that you have to be beautiful to be happy. And the third one is to recognize or to contemplate, what is it that we most fear loss of? Going blind or going deaf or paralysis. The loss of functions in the body creates a lot of fear for us. And by bringing those to mind and to accept our attachment to these things. And of course we know from people who do have disabilities that it doesn't have to undermine the quality of your life, but moving from an able person to a disabled person is traumatic. It's traumatic. It's a sort of death, you see. But once you get there and arrive, then you know, you accept things as they are. So these contemplations are there to find a different relationship to the body, and that relationship is to be disenchanted with it. Yeah, not to be caught up in it, but to see it as a precious vehicle through which we are trying to become fully liberated from suffering. So I can only hope my words will in fact lead you to the liberation from suffering sooner rather than later. So we can begin our contemplation, our meditation.